The email swam before my eyes, each word a fresh wave of nausea. Italy, my sister's wedding. Everyone was confirmed except me. They said there must have been a mistake, a glitch in the system. But the sinking feeling in my stomach told me this was no accident. This was deliberate. And the worst part, they acted like it wasn't a big deal, like I could just hop on another flight, find a last-minute hotel in Tuscany during peak season. The sheer audacity took my breath away. They thought I would crumble, accept their flimsy excuses, and fade into the background. They had no idea what they had unleashed. If you have a sister, mother, or family member who has always been there for you, subscribe right now and share this story. My name is Lucy and family has always been complicated. My older sister, Sophia, was the golden child, the shining star, the one who could do no wrong. I was just Lucy. The dependable one, the responsible one, the one who always cleaned up the messes. And for years, I played that role willingly. I sent money home every month, even when I was barely scraping by myself. I listened to my mother's endless complaints, my father's thinly veiled criticisms, Sophia's constant need for attention. I was the rock, the steady presence, the glue that held them all together. So when Sophia announced her engagement to Alessandro, a charming Italian count, yes, really, I was thrilled. I started planning my trip months in advance, meticulously saving every penny, dreaming of cobblestone streets and sun-drenched vineyards. I even wired my parents $4,000 to cover the cost of my plane ticket and accommodation. I trusted them implicitly. I shouldn't have. The first red flag was the lack of communication. Weeks turned into months, and I still hadn't received any confirmation. My emails and texts were met with vague responses and flimsy excuses. "Oh, we're so busy with the wedding planning. Don't worry, darling, it's all taken care of. Just focus on getting here." But my gut told me something was terribly wrong. Then came the email, the one that confirmed my worst fears. "Dearest Lucy," it began, dripping with false sincerity, "we're so sorry, but there seems to have been a mix-up with your booking." Mix-up. It was a calculated move, a deliberate exclusion. They had forgotten about me. The day I received that email, the world tilted on its axis. The years of quiet resentment, the suppressed anger, the countless sacrifices, it all came crashing down on me. I felt a cold, hard knot forming in my stomach, a feeling that had nothing to do with sadness and everything to do with fury. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't even raise my voice. I simply stared at the screen, my mind racing, plotting, planning. They thought they could erase me, dismiss me, treat me like I was invisible. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. I booked a one-way ticket to Rome, a tiny, cramped room in a hostel miles away from the Tuscan villa where the wedding was to take place. They expected tears, a desperate phone call begging for forgiveness. What they got was silence. A silence that would soon turn into a storm. I deactivated my social media, cut off all contact, and disappeared. I wanted them to savor their moment of triumph, to bask in the glow of Sophia's happiness, to believe they had gotten away with it. Because the sweeter the victory, the more devastating the fall, I knew exactly what I had to do. The person I trusted most was one of them. It wasn't my mother, though she certainly played her part in the grand scheme of things. It wasn't my father with his constant disappointment and subtle jabs. It was Sophia, my own sister. The one I had always protected, always defended, always loved. I discovered a series of old text messages between Sophia and my mother where they were openly discussing how to keep me away from the wedding, that my presence would detract from Sophia's special day. That was the crimson line. That was the moment any lingering love I had for them completely vanished. From that moment on, I was a woman on a mission. The hostel in Rome was a far cry from the luxurious villa in Tuscany where my sister was preparing to say, "I do." It was cramped, noisy, and reeked of stale cigarettes and desperation. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sophia's smug face, heard my mother's dismissive tone, felt the sting of their betrayal. I tossed and turned, my mind a whirlwind of anger and resentment, replaying every slight, every injustice, every moment where I had been overlooked, undervalued, and unappreciated. I tried to reason with myself, to find a way to forgive them, to move on. But the wound was too deep, the pain too raw. They had not just excluded me from a wedding, they had erased me from their lives. And I refused to let them get away with it. During the day, I wandered the streets of Rome, a ghost in a foreign city. I visited ancient ruins, admired breathtaking artwork, ate delicious food, but none of it could penetrate the darkness that had settled over my soul. I was merely going through the motions, pretending to be a tourist, while my mind was consumed with thoughts of revenge. I tried calling my parents, hoping against hope that it was all a misunderstanding, that they would apologize, that they would beg me to come to Tuscany. But my calls went unanswered. My texts were ignored. It was as if I had ceased to exist. Their silence only fueled my anger, hardening my resolve. I knew I couldn't let this go. I couldn't just pretend it didn't happen. I had to make them understand the gravity of their actions. I had to make them pay. My initial plan was simple: confront them at the wedding, expose their lies, and ruin Sophia's perfect day. But as I sat alone in my dingy hostel room, surrounded by the sounds of the city, I realized that wouldn't be enough. A simple confrontation would be a temporary setback, a fleeting moment of embarrassment. I wanted to inflict lasting damage, to dismantle their carefully constructed facade, to expose their true selves to the world. That's when I decided to dig deeper, to uncover their secrets, to find the leverage I needed to truly bring them down. I started by reaching out to distant relatives, old family friends, anyone who might have some insight into my family's past. I painted myself as the concerned daughter, worried about my parents' well-being, eager to reconnect after years of estrangement. It was a carefully crafted performance, designed to elicit sympathy and loosen tongues. And it worked. Slowly but surely, I began to piece together a mosaic of lies, deceit, and hidden agendas. I discovered that my father had been struggling with gambling debts for years, a secret he had desperately tried to keep hidden from my mother. I learned that my mother had been secretly funding Sophia's lavish lifestyle with money she had borrowed from my grandmother's trust fund. And I uncovered a series of disturbing emails between Sophia and Alessandro, revealing that their relationship was not the fairy tale romance they had portrayed to the world. It was a business arrangement, a marriage of convenience, designed to elevate their social status and secure their financial future. The more I learned, the more disgusted I became. These were not the people I thought I knew. They were master manipulators, skilled liars, willing to do anything to protect their own interests. I knew I had to be careful. They were dangerous, and they wouldn't hesitate to turn on me if they suspected I was onto them. I started using burner phones, encrypted email accounts, and anonymous social media profiles to communicate with my sources and gather information. I became a ghost, a shadow operating in the digital underworld, determined to expose their secrets and bring them to justice. The weight of my mission began to take its toll. I was constantly on edge, paranoid, and exhausted. Sleepless nights were filled with nightmares, and my days were consumed with anxiety. I lost my appetite, neglected my hygiene, and isolated myself from the world. I was becoming the very thing I hated, a bitter, resentful, and consumed by darkness. But I couldn't stop. I had come too far, sacrificed too much. I had to see it through to the end. I had to make them pay for what they had done to me. The wedding was fast approaching, and I knew I had to act quickly. I had gathered enough information to ruin them, but I needed to find the right moment to strike, the perfect opportunity to expose their lies and shatter their illusions. I considered crashing the wedding, storming into the reception, and revealing their secrets in front of all their guests. But that felt too impulsive, too messy, too likely to backfire. I needed a more calculated approach, a more precise strike, something that would inflict maximum damage with minimal risk. That's when I realized their biggest weakness, their vanity. They were so consumed with their image, so desperate to maintain their perfect facade, that they were blind to the dangers around them. They believed they were untouchable, that they could get away with anything. And that arrogance would be their downfall. I decided to create a website, a digital repository of all the dirt I had gathered on them. I called it The Truth About the Rossi Family. It was a simple, minimalist design, with a stark black background and white text. The homepage featured a family portrait, the same one they had used on their wedding invitations. But I had subtly altered it, adding shadows and distortions to their faces, making them look sinister and menacing. The website was password protected, accessible only to a select group of people: family members, close friends, business associates, and members of the media. I wanted to control the narrative, to ensure that the truth was revealed in a way that would inflict maximum damage. I spent days meticulously crafting the content, writing articles, compiling documents, and uploading photos and videos. I included everything: my father's gambling debts, my mother's embezzlement, Sophia's sham marriage, and their cruel exclusion of me. I presented the information in a clear, concise, and irrefutable manner, leaving no room for doubt or interpretation. I even included screenshots of their text messages, proving their malicious intent. Once the website was complete, I uploaded it to a secure server and waited for the perfect moment to unleash it upon the world. I knew that once the truth was out, their lives would never be the same. Their reputations would be ruined, their relationships shattered, and their carefully constructed world would crumble around them. And I would finally have my revenge. The days leading up to the wedding were a blur of anxiety and anticipation. I barely ate, barely slept, my mind consumed with the impending moment of truth. I checked the website obsessively, making sure everything was perfect, every detail accounted for. I even wrote a series of automated emails, scheduled to be sent to specific individuals at precise times, ensuring that the information would reach the right people at the right moment. I was like a puppet master, pulling the strings from the shadows, orchestrating a symphony of chaos and destruction. But as the wedding day drew nearer, a sense of unease began to creep into my mind. Doubts gnawed at me, whispering insidious questions in the darkness. Was I doing the right thing? Was I justified in seeking such extreme revenge? Was I becoming the very thing I hated? I tried to ignore these doubts, to suppress the guilt and the fear, but they persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. I started having vivid nightmares, dreams where I was trapped in a maze of mirrors, each reflection showing a distorted version of myself, a monster consumed by hatred and vengeance. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, my body trembling, the weight of my actions crushing me. I realized that I was on the verge of losing myself, of succumbing to the darkness that had taken root in my soul. I needed to find a way to break free, to reclaim my humanity before it was too late. The night before the wedding, I found myself standing on a bridge overlooking the Tiber River, the city lights shimmering in the dark water below. I felt a profound sense of loneliness, a deep emptiness that threatened to swallow me whole. I thought about turning back, about abandoning my plan, about forgiving my family and trying to move on. But then I remembered the email, the one that had started it all, the one that had erased me from their lives. And the anger surged through me once again, hardening my resolve. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and made a decision. I would see it through to the end. I would expose their lies, shatter their illusions, and claim my revenge. But I would do it on my own terms. I would not let the darkness consume me. I would not become a monster. I would simply reveal the truth and let the chips fall where they may. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, a picture-perfect day for a picture-perfect event. I woke up feeling strangely calm, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I showered, dressed, and ate a light breakfast, trying to savor the simple pleasures of life. I refused to let the anxiety consume me, to let the fear paralyze me. I was in control, and I would not let them take that away from me. I spent the morning wandering the streets of Rome, visiting my favorite cafes, admiring the beautiful architecture, and soaking in the vibrant atmosphere. I tried to focus on the present moment, to appreciate the beauty around me, to remind myself that there was still good in the world, even in the face of such darkness. But as the afternoon approached, the anticipation began to build once again, gnawing at my insides, making me restless and uneasy. I knew that the moment of truth was fast approaching, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. I spent the last few hours before the wedding holed up in my hostel room, checking the website one last time, making sure everything was in place. I wrote a letter to my parents, pouring out my heart, expressing my pain, my anger, and my disappointment. I didn't know if they would ever read it, but I needed to say what was on my mind, to release the pent-up emotions that had been festering inside me for so long. I sealed the letter, addressed it to my parents' home, and left it on my bed, hoping that someone would find it and deliver it to them. As the sun began to set, I made my way to a nearby internet cafe, the one I had been using to access the website anonymously. I sat down at a computer, took a deep breath, and prepared to unleash the storm. I logged into my encrypted email account, and composed a short message to the select group of people who had access to the website. "The truth is out," I wrote. "The time has come to see the Rossi family for who they really are." I attached the website address and the password, and then I hit send. The feeling that followed was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was a mixture of relief, fear, and exhilaration, a sense of power and vulnerability all rolled into one. I knew that I had just unleashed something that could potentially destroy my family, but I also knew that it was the right thing to do. They had betrayed me, they had lied to me, they had tried to erase me from their lives. And now they would pay the price. I sat in the internet cafe for hours, watching the news reports unfold, monitoring the social media chatter, and tracking the website traffic. The response was immediate and overwhelming. People were shocked, outraged, and fascinated by the revelations. The website went viral, spreading like wildfire across the internet. News outlets picked up the story, and soon the Rossi family was the subject of intense scrutiny and public ridicule. I watched it all unfold from the shadows, feeling a strange sense of detachment, as if I were watching a movie, not the destruction of my own family. But as the night wore on, the reality of what I had done began to sink in. I had exposed my parents' secrets, ruined my sister's wedding, and shattered my family's reputation. I had inflicted immense pain and suffering, not only on them but also on myself, and I couldn't help but wonder if it had all been worth it. I left the internet cafe and wandered the streets of Rome, feeling lost and alone. The city lights seemed to mock me, casting long, distorted shadows that danced around my feet. I found myself standing on the same bridge where I had stood the night before, staring into the dark water below. But this time, I didn't feel the same sense of loneliness, the same emptiness that had threatened to swallow me whole. Instead, I felt a strange sense of peace, a quiet acceptance of what I had done. I knew that I had crossed a line, that I had irrevocably changed my life and the lives of my family. But I also knew that I had done what I had to do, that I had stood up for myself, that I had refused to be a victim any longer. And that, in itself, was a victory. I turned away from the bridge and began to walk, not knowing where I was going but feeling a sense of purpose, a sense of hope. I was no longer the same person I had been when I arrived in Rome. I was stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever before. I had faced my demons, I had conquered my fears, and I had emerged from the darkness, ready to start a new chapter in my life. The revenge was complete. I knew that simply releasing the information wouldn't be enough. I needed to ensure they couldn't sweep it under the rug, that their lies would be exposed for everyone to see, no matter how hard they tried to bury the truth. I began formulating a plan to amplify the exposure, to make their secrets undeniable and inescapable. It started with meticulously documenting every piece of evidence, creating backups on multiple secure servers, and encrypting everything with military-grade encryption. I knew they would try to discredit me, to paint me as a scorned and vengeful daughter, so I needed to make sure my evidence was airtight and irrefutable. I researched defamation laws, consulted with anonymous legal experts online, and crafted my website's content to be factual and objective, avoiding emotional language or personal attacks. I wanted the evidence to speak for itself, to let their actions condemn them, not my words. I knew that getting the information to the right people was crucial. I compiled a list of journalists, bloggers, and social media influencers who had a history of exposing corruption and injustice. I drafted personalized emails to each of them, offering exclusive access to the website and promising to provide them with additional information and support. I used burner phones and VPNs to protect my identity, careful to leave no trace that could lead back to me. I even created a fake persona, a concerned citizen who had stumbled upon the information and felt compelled to share it with the world. It was a risky move, but I knew that the potential reward was worth the risk. I spent hours studying their online habits, learning their schedules, and identifying their weaknesses. I discovered that Sophia was addicted to social media, constantly posting updates about her lavish lifestyle and obsessively monitoring her online reputation. My mother was a news junkie, always reading the latest headlines and checking her stock portfolio. And my father was a gambling addict, spending hours each day at online casinos and sports betting sites. I realized that I could use their addictions against them, planting seeds of doubt and suspicion in their minds, driving them to paranoia and despair. I started by creating fake social media profiles, posing as admirers of Sophia, showering her with compliments and praise, but also subtly hinting at the rumors and whispers that were circulating about her family. I sent anonymous emails to my mother, warning her about the potential consequences of her actions and urging her to come clean before it was too late. And I created a fake online casino account, befriending my father and slowly enticing him into a high-stakes gambling game, knowing that his desperation to win would cloud his judgment and make him vulnerable to manipulation. I anticipated their every move, preparing countermeasures for their inevitable attempts to silence me. I knew they would try to hack my website, so I hired a team of cybersecurity experts to fortify its defenses and monitor for any suspicious activity. I knew they would try to track me down, so I used a variety of techniques to obfuscate my location and protect my identity. I used public Wi-Fi networks, prepaid credit cards, and anonymous email accounts. I even learned how to spoof my IP address and disguise my voice. I became a ghost, a digital phantom, impossible to trace or identify. There were close calls, moments when I thought I had been discovered, when my heart pounded in my chest and my hands trembled with fear. One night, I received a call on my burner phone, a distorted voice on the other end threatening to silence me if I didn't stop what I was doing. I immediately hung up and changed my phone number, but the fear lingered, reminding me of the dangers I was facing. Another time, I noticed a suspicious car parked outside my hostel, its occupants watching me with cold, calculating eyes. I quickly packed my bags and checked out, moving to a different location and taking extra precautions to avoid being followed. But despite the risks, I refused to back down. I was too close to my goal, too invested in my mission to let fear stop me now. I had come too far, sacrificed too much to turn back. I was determined to see it through to the end, no matter the cost. As the wedding day approached, the tension mounted, both for them and for me. I meticulously planned my final strike, timing the release of the website to coincide with the ceremony, maximizing the impact, and ensuring that their perfect day would be forever tainted by the truth. I scheduled the automated emails to be sent to key guests just as the vows were being exchanged, disrupting the ceremony and creating chaos and confusion. I even hired a drone to fly over the wedding venue, capturing footage of the unfolding drama and broadcasting it live on social media. It was a high-stakes gamble, but I was confident that it would pay off, that their lies would be exposed and their reputations ruined. I spent the final hours before the wedding in a state of heightened alertness, monitoring the news, tracking social media, and waiting for the moment to unleash my plan. I felt like a predator stalking its prey, savoring the anticipation of the kill. My hands were steady, my mind clear, and my heart filled with a cold, unwavering resolve. I was ready. The wedding was hours away, and I went over the plan for the thousandth time, but something felt wrong. It wasn't doubt, not exactly. It was incompleteness, like a puzzle with one vital piece missing. I re-examined every email, every document, every financial record I'd managed to unearth. Nothing. Then, almost by accident, I stumbled across an old, encrypted file hidden deep within my father's personal server. It was labeled simply Project Nightingale. My heart hammered. Nightingale was the code name my mother had used during her early years at the company, the one she supposedly left behind to raise her family. I ran the decryption program, my fingers flying across the keyboard, a knot tightening in my stomach with each passing second. Finally, the file opened. It was a series of internal memos, financial statements, and legal documents, all related to a secret offshore account. An account used to funnel money out of the company, siphoning off profits and hiding them from taxes. But that wasn't the worst of it. The documents revealed that my mother wasn't just a passive participant. She was the architect of the entire scheme. Project Nightingale wasn't something she'd left behind, it was her masterpiece. And my father, the supposed ethical businessman, was her willing accomplice. The missing piece slammed into place with the force of a wrecking ball. This wasn't just about a stolen idea or a broken promise. It was about systemic fraud, about betraying the trust of shareholders, employees, and the government itself. It was a crime that could land them both in prison for a very long time. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a cold, focused energy coursing through my veins. This was it. This was the leverage I needed to ensure their complete and utter destruction. But I also knew that this information was too sensitive to release indiscriminately. It needed to be handled with precision, delivered to the right authorities, and exposed in a way that would leave no room for doubt or denial. I immediately contacted my anonymous legal consultant, relaying the new information and seeking advice on how to proceed. He urged caution, warning me that exposing corporate fraud could be a dangerous game, that my parents would likely have powerful allies and resources at their disposal. But he also confirmed that the evidence was damning, and that if handled correctly, it could bring them down. We spent the next few hours crafting a detailed report, outlining the evidence and identifying the key players involved in the scheme. We compiled a list of regulatory agencies, law enforcement officials, and investigative journalists who would be most likely to pursue the case. And we developed a strategy for releasing the information anonymously, protecting my identity, and ensuring the integrity of the investigation. The plan was complex and risky, but it was the only way to ensure that justice would be served. With the new evidence in hand, I recalibrated the final act. The wedding was no longer just about exposing personal betrayals. It was about unveiling a web of deceit and corruption that reached the highest levels of the company. I updated the website, adding a new section dedicated to Project Nightingale, and including links to the key documents and financial statements. I drafted a new email to the journalists, bloggers, and influencers, alerting them to the new revelations and urging them to investigate. I even composed an anonymous letter to the CEO of the company, outlining the fraud and threatening to expose it publicly if he didn't take immediate action. I knew that I was playing with fire, that I was risking everything, but I was determined to see it through. The wedding day arrived, sunny and warm, everything was ready to go. I monitored the live feeds, watching the guests arrive, the photographers snapping pictures, and the bride walking down the aisle. The tension was palpable, the air thick with anticipation. The moment the vows were being exchanged, I pressed send. The emails went out, the website went live, and the drone took to the sky. The storm had begun. But this time, it was bigger, fiercer, and more destructive than I could have ever imagined. As the news began to spread, chaos erupted. Guests started whispering, phones buzzed, and faces paled. Sophia, halfway through her vows, saw her mother looking at her phone in utter shock. Her perfect makeup couldn't mask the growing horror in her eyes. I watched as the carefully constructed facade of the Rossi family crumbled before my very eyes, their perfect world shattering into a million pieces. I knew it was far from over, but I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. Then my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "We know who you are." The distorted voice sent a chill down my spine. "And we're coming for you." The distorted voice on the phone was like a physical blow. My breath hitched. They knew. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but I forced it down, clinging to the icy calm that had guided me this far. I disconnected the call, crushed the burner phone under my heel, and melted back into the Roman streets, a ghost once more. But this time, I knew they were hunting me. The wedding fallout was immediate and spectacular. The drone footage went viral, showing the bride sobbing, the groom looking stunned, and the guests scattering like rats from a sinking ship. News outlets around the world picked up the story, splashing headlines about the Rossi family's betrayal, their fraud, and their secrets. Social media exploded with outrage, and calls for investigations flooded the internet. The carefully constructed image of the Rossi family, their empire, and their perfect life was gone, replaced by a portrait of greed, deceit, and corruption. Sophia's social media accounts were bombarded with hateful comments, her sponsorships evaporated, and her carefully cultivated online persona was destroyed. My mother's reputation as a savvy businesswoman was in tatters, her stock portfolio plummeted, and she faced investigations from multiple regulatory agencies. My father, the gambling addict, was exposed, his online accounts frozen, and his reputation forever tainted. But the real damage came from Project Nightingale. The anonymous letter to the CEO triggered an internal investigation, which quickly uncovered the full extent of the fraud. The company's stock price tanked, shareholders filed lawsuits, and the authorities launched a criminal investigation. My parents were immediately suspended from their positions, their assets were frozen, and they faced the prospect of years in prison. I watched it all unfold from the shadows, a strange mix of satisfaction and unease churning in my stomach. They had lost everything. Their wealth, their status, their freedom. But the victory felt hollow. The threat from the phone call hung over me, a dark cloud casting a shadow over my triumph. I knew they wouldn't give up easily, that they would use all their remaining resources to silence me to protect themselves. I had to disappear, to vanish completely, to start a new life under a new identity. I spent the next few days preparing my escape, gathering supplies, securing travel documents, and erasing all traces of my existence. I sold everything I owned, transferred the money to an untraceable account, and booked a one-way ticket to a remote island on the other side of the world. I changed my appearance, dyed my hair, and adopted a new name. I was no longer the broken, victimized daughter. I was a survivor, a warrior, ready to face whatever the future held. As I boarded the plane, I glanced back at Rome, a city that had been both my prison and my liberation. I felt a pang of sadness, a sense of loss for the life I had left behind. But I also felt a surge of hope, a sense of excitement for the new life that awaited me. I knew that I would never be truly free, that the memories of the past would always haunt me. But I also knew that I had done what I had to do, that I had stood up for myself, and that I had emerged from the darkness stronger and more resilient than ever before. They lost everything. I just smiled. Years later, I received a message from my legal consultant. My parents had been convicted of fraud, sentenced to lengthy prison terms, and ordered to pay massive fines. Their empire was dismantled, their reputation ruined, and their family name forever tarnished. Sophia had retreated from the public eye, living a quiet life in obscurity. The Rossi family was no more. The voice on the phone never found me. I had successfully disappeared, creating a new life for myself in a peaceful corner of the world. I had found solace in anonymity, in the simple pleasures of life, and in the knowledge that I had finally achieved justice. Revenge isn't sweet, it's necessary. It's a harsh medicine, a bitter pill, but sometimes it's the only way to heal. It's the only way to break the cycle of abuse, to stand up to injustice, and to reclaim your life. It came at a cost to my soul, and that cost is something I am still dealing with. But I would do it again. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.